Hello, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Infinite Learning's webinar. My name is Rebecca Anand. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Infinite Learning. We are delighted to be running this webinar today in partnership with Helen Battelley, who you'll see on your screen, and we're welcoming her today to speak about Prime for a Reason, Early Years Movement Play. Now, this course is aimed at early years, TAs, PE teachers, early years foundation, primary, daycare, nursery. So hopefully you fit into one of those categories. And the webinar today is looking at this: how in early years the most effective way to learn is through movement play. Children need an environment which supports physical activity to elicit excellent responses. So hopefully we're going to delve into that a little bit deeper with Helen. And before I do so, I just want to cover a few small areas of housekeeping. So at the moment you are automatically on silent mode and your video is off, because obviously we get large numbers on these webinars and it's a little bit too disruptive if people have got the background noise and things on. So we're going to allow Helen to deliver her presentation, and then at the end we'll have a question and answer session. So please do use your chat box to ask any questions as you go along, and as I say, the last 15-20 minutes we'll use that time to answer any queries that you may have. Can I also just remind you a couple of things that you will receive, so you don't need to ask these questions. At the end of the webinar session today, there'll be a follow-up email from Sarah, and she'll be sending you a copy of the PowerPoint, some video links, and some other resources for you. And then tomorrow at 5 o'clock, you will receive a link to the video. So if you wanted to recap on something and watch it again, you'll be able to do that. There'll also be a certificate of attendance for those of you that attended, and also a questionnaire as part of that follow-up email. So please do give us your feedback, because that's really valuable to us, and we share that with Helen. So I think that's it from me for now. Without further ado, Helen, over to you.
Great, thank you, Rebecca, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. I hope you're all well. So I'll just start off by telling you a little bit about myself. My name is Helen Battelley. I'm based here in the UK, and I am an early years movement specialist. I have an MA in early childhood physical activity, a degree in performing arts, and I'm currently working towards my PhD. I am extremely passionate about early childhood movement play and physical activity, which you will find out in the next 40 minutes. As well as that, I also sit on the panel for the International Society for Physical Activity Health, and I'm a member of Sadiq Khan's London Obesity Task Force. So with all of that information and all of that background that I have, I create training now for early years practitioners, Key Stage 1 staff, basically anyone working with under 7s across the world. Over the last 6 weeks, I've been delivering online training for international schools all over the world, and so far I've had over 800 international delegates attend my training in those last 6 weeks, which is pretty phenomenal. So I'm delighted to be here today, and I'm going to start by sharing my presentation with you all. So we learn more physical skills in our first 5 years than at any other time in our lives. Therefore, it's important that young children have lots of time to practice and develop skills. A moving child is a learning child. Now, I just want you to think back to your childhood now, and just think back to your first memory. For me, it's quite a long time ago, but can you think about your first memory? For me, it was probably, I think I was around 2 or 3, and I'd climbed out of my cot and obviously fell over the other side and hurt myself. But generally, people's first skills, first memory will be a physical memory, because our physical memory dominates over 60% of our memory, our episodic memory. So we have our auditory memory, sound, we have our visual memory, obviously seeing, and we have our olfactory memory, which is our sense of smell, and then our physical memory. So if we think about the way that we're teaching and the way we're delivering our lessons or our planning or whatever we're doing, if we're going to add that physical element into it, then we know we're going to be getting more engagements with those child, because it's going to be triggering their episodic memory. Now think about when you sat for prolonged periods of time today might be one of them. But I've sort of pre-COVID remember going to lots of conferences where we'd sit sort of an hour and a half, 90 minutes or 2 hours at a time. And I would be diligently taking notes for the first sort of 40 minutes. And then as time progresses, on the other piece of the paper, you'll see my shopping list, and then perhaps a list of household chores I've got to do when I've got home, because my mind has just shut off and I've stopped listening because I haven't been moving. So I haven't triggered that part of my brain. I haven't oxygenated my brain. Those endorphins haven't helped me to learn. So we need to think about that and be mindful of that when we're planning our lessons in early childhood. Now, there's a little exercise for you to do with this. So in the beginning, there was movement. Now, movement is instrumental in the formation of the brain. And subsequently, each repetitive movement strengthens neural pathways and it cements communication between the body and the brain. What does that look like? Now, I can't see you all, so I've got to trust that you're going to do this. What I'd like you all to do is to cross your arms. So you should have one hand down, one hand up, and as you look down, they should be crossed in the middle. Okay, just a very easy crossing your arms, folding your arms. Now give your hands a shake. Stretch them up as high as you can. Now I would like you to fold them the other way, the opposite way to before. It's not as easy, is it? It's not as simple to do it the opposite way. Have a look. Have you still got one hand up and one hand down? Are they crossed? Have a look and see. Now, why was it not so simple? Such a simple task. We're clever people. Why couldn't we fold our arms the opposite way? Well, because if we look back to that slide, every repetitive movement strengthens neural pathways which cement that communication between the body and the brain. Now, because all of our life we have been folding our arms this way, the same way that we've done it, it's become habitual. But because we've repeated it so many times, it's now cemented within the neural architecture of our brain, so we do not need to think about it. So it doesn't require cortical control. Yet when we fold our arms the opposite way, we have to really think about it, didn't we? We have to apply all our cortical control, all our cognitive processing to be able to think, okay, which way did we do it? Because it wasn't cemented in the brain. Now we can fold our arms automatically, the normal way that we always do it, because it's cemented. So we can talk, we can do it without even thinking about it. Now, young children haven't spent enough time on this planet to cement a lot of physical skills. So those physical skills that we're teaching them, it requires all of their cognitive processing, their cortical control. So if we're thinking, let's have a scenario. So we've got Holly is in the classroom, we're getting ready for PE. So Holly has to take off her socks and shoes and she puts them together. And then you're saying to Holly, okay, shoes and socks off, socks inside your shoes. Then I want you to move them, put them against the wall and line up at the door. Now, if Holly is not familiar with taking off her shoes and socks, that is going to apply all of her cognitive processing. She won't be able to listen. She won't be able to listen to you at the same time because all of her cognitive processing is happening with that skill, trying to take off her socks. So she'll come to you after she's taken her shoes off and say, what happens next? Or she'll leave her shoes and socks in the middle of the floor and be wandering around looking to see what everybody else is doing. So we need to be very clear as educators in understanding that children need that time to repeat and refine those physical skills to ensure that they are cemented within the brain. So hopefully that's helped you to understand a little bit more about how imperative movement is for understanding speech and language specifically as well. So according to the World Health Organization, what are the recommended amount of physical activity in minutes that a child should have between the ages of 2 and 5? So what should they have every day? Now, if you want to, you can have a guess and put them in your the chat room and see if you can guess the answer. I always think it's quite nice to see if anybody knows that answer. So what is the recommended amount of physical activity that a child aged 2 to 5 should have every day? Have a think about it. What do you think? Let's see it in the chat room. Let's see these answers coming in if we can. What have we got so far? What do you think? Is it going to be 30 minutes? Is it going to be 60 minutes? 90 minutes? 180 minutes? Let's have a look. Let's find out what the answer is. It's 180 minutes. So the recommended amount of exercise a young child should have every day is 180 minutes. 60 minutes of that should be high impact cardio activity. Now, looking at those 180 minutes, do we think that children within our settings, within our classes, are reaching those levels? And what is physical activity? How do we define physical activity? Is it standing up? Is it going over to the play area and using some blocks? What constitutes physical activity? Well, the World Health Organization identified physical activity as whole body energy expenditure. So it could be getting up from the floor or going to sit down. It could be putting on coats. It could be moving from one area to another. It could be running, climbing, moving in, out, through, over different apparatus. And then high impact is what's called MVPA, moderate to vigorous physical activity. So for that, we're going to be seeing panting. We're going to be seeing that real high levels of energy expenditure. So in early childhood, that could be climbing, it could be using locomotor apparatus like bikes, push-alongs, pull-alongs, running, dancing, lots of ways to reach that. But if we look, those 60 minutes, they're going to be quite hard to achieve. But remember, this is in a 24-hour period, so you need to know your children. How much physical activity are they getting outside of the school or the daycare environments? Because we need to have a whole round idea of what their physical activity levels are, because it is going to impact on all developmental areas. Now, part of my studies as a researcher identified the importance of us as educators and how we perceive physical activity. Because it's interesting, because children are generally unable to be physically active without the permission of the adult teacher, making the role of the educator fundamental as a facilitator. And adopting a movement intervention or a movement philosophy within your classroom is at the discretion of the teacher, at your discretion. And research indicates that this depends on people's personal decision, which is influenced by their willingness to change and adults' motivation or their penchant for sport. So we can see that if you're somebody that really, really enjoys physical activity, then the likelihood is that your classes will be more physically engaging than somebody who doesn't. So we can see the importance of being physically active yourself and having that passion and desire to be physically active yourself as well. So as an educator, does your environment reflect a physical activity space? Is it a space where that allows lots of movement? Have you got free flow provision? Can children access lots of outdoor play? So think about your current environment and whether that facilitates physical activity. So through physical activity, children will increase stamina, strength and mobility. They'll stimulate brain connections and cement neural pathways. They'll develop motor skills, both in fine and gross, in agility, stability, coordination, musicality, balance, spatial awareness and control, and develop skills in problem solving, decision making, creativity and reasoning. So just look at all of those areas. Now, are they transferable to other areas of learning? Well, we certainly need them in mathematical development and numeracy. We certainly need them in writing skills. We certainly need them in all areas, because problem solving, decision making, creativity and reasoning are fundamental in early childhood development. So we can see how imperative physical activity is in early childhood. Now, I think it's really important to have some context here about where we are globally. Now, all of this data here is pre-COVID. So this is really interesting to think about where we are now, sort of in the middle of COVID-19. So in 2016, an estimated 42 million children under the age of 5 were overweight or obese, and almost 3/4 of these live in Asia or Africa. So this is the World Health Organization's childhood obesity plan. So they're looking that all member states should implement comprehensive programs that promote physical activity, reduce sedentary behaviors in children and adolescents. And evidence shows that early intervention, so getting children to develop those lifelong passions with physical activity at an early age, will continue through to adolescenthood. So it's really important to get this behaviour and this passion embedded in early childhood. So I'm just going to move across that slide. So we can see here the conclusion from the childhood obesity strategy from the World Health Organization. Interestingly, back in 2017, the World Health Organization released a report saying for the first time globally, obesity is killing more people than malnutrition. So that's a really shocking statistic that we're currently living in. Okay, so what is physical completeness and why is physical activity so important? Well, we're going to have better physical health, and that's so important because if you're an obese child, you've got a 70% higher chance of being an obese adult. Emotional well-being. We know that when we're physically active, we are better and healthier and more emotional, and our mental well-being is better. Cognition and memory development. We know that physical activity helps to support the development of the hippocampus, which is responsible for memory. Social interaction. We know that those who engage in sports and physical activity are better at developing relationships and in communication as well. So we can see how fundamental this is in early childhood to have all of these in place. Now here we can see me working with, this was a reception class in a school in Cambridge, and you can see on the picture on the left that I'm laying down on my side, and we'd laid down a piece of bubble wrap, and I'd asked the children to find as many ways as possible to pop the bubbles. So they were jumping on it, using their elbows, using their bottoms, crawling, various different ways. And then one little girl said that she had a great way of doing it. We were going to lay down like a pencil and roll along. So then we all took it in turns to try that. So that's a great way to use recyclable packaging. So to cover the whole floor, there I've just used a roll, but sometimes I cover the whole floor. We take our shoes and socks off and we explore as many ways to move as possible and to pop those bubbles. Now you can also make it even more fun by turning off the lights and giving the children torches, and we can explore being on the moon. So you might want to read a book like Whatever Next, where he goes up to the moon, and the teddy bear goes up to the moon. He wears a colander on his head, and then you could play something like Strauss, which is the music from Star Wars, and you could not Star Wars, yeah, Star Wars, and then tiptoe along the wall, trying not to pop the bubbles, using your torches and imagining that you're astronauts. That's a great activity to do. Now on that slide as well, you'll see some really messy floor work under there. What we were doing for that activity is I had used lots of different emotive music, so happy music, sad music, angry music, scary music, different types of music, and I gave the children 2 pieces of chalk and I played the music and I said, draw for me how the music makes you feel. And so they had their chalks and they moved their chalks around the floor, making lots of patterns. It was interesting to see how the different genres of music and different types of music evoked different responses. So when I used drum and bass, for example, which there was lots of spots and zigzags and really quite aggressive patterns. And again, what we're doing there is strengthening the shoulder girdle and the 60 combined muscles in the hand for writing. So that's a really good activity. And then when I used classical music like Ludovico Einaudi's Nefelli, which is a beautiful fluid piece of music, and all of the patterns became sort of symmetrical and flowing and fluid. It was beautiful to watch. And on the other slide here, I'm using scarves. So again, we listened to the same pieces of music, but this time we used scarves as our stimuli, and we responded to the music using the scarves. Okay, here's a recent statistic for you. I think this is really interesting. In a recent study, what percentage of UK 2 to 4 year olds were not getting enough physical development in their daily lives? So what figure? Have a think in your head. What figure do you think this is going to be? Have we got some idealists, some pessimists, some optimists? What do you think? Okay, the figure is 91%. 91% of UK 2 to 4 year olds were not getting enough physical development in their daily lives. Now that is going to impact all areas of development. And again, this statistic was pre-COVID. So what's going to happen now? Where are children's physical activity levels? Thankfully, I work with a lot of different organisations that work with parents, and a lot of parents have said during COVID, as a family, they've been more active. But sadly, that's not across the board. And because of lockdown, a lot of people weren't allowed out. So we need to be aware of this. With children coming into education this first few weeks, we need to be able to assess their developmental areas. There was a study by the Times Education Supplement that came out 2 days ago that identified that they were seeing children, teachers were seeing children with fidgety fingers, unable to control their fingers because of really prolonged periods of digital technology, and also that they were falling asleep at their desks because of later staggered bedtimes, and also they lacked focus and concentration because of not having that routine. So we need to be aware of the impact that lack of physical activity has had on their learning. Now, physical activity presents a physiological stress to the brain. When it says stress, it doesn't mean an anxiety stress. It means a high energy, alert stress that when balanced with recovery, promotes adaptation and growth and preserves brain function and enables the brain to respond to future challenges. So we can see how fundamental physical activity is in brain development. Now, many factors influence the level of physical activity engagement. Remember the other slide, which I spoke about, is how as educators, you are the facilitator of that environment, that children can only be physically active with the permission of the adult that's within their care. So outdoor environments, and so these are the many factors influence the level of physical activity engagement within early childhood education settings. So the outdoor environment, the child's characteristics, parental views, and the role of the educator. Now, this study on outdoor environments found that children's physical activity levels were higher in natural environments than early childhood education outdoor environments, and had a greater influence on physical activity play for 3 to 5 year olds. So with this in mind, how can you adapt your space to reflect the natural environment? Well, we know within early childhood now we're trying not to have this kind of really colourful space. We're trying to make everything natural. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Nicholson's loose parts theory. So we need to be looking at creating outdoor environments that have exposure to loose parts play. We need to be thinking about Gibson's affordances, because children are only going to be playing and accessing those affordances, those stimuli that you have available to them. And are they stimuli that are going to support physical activity? But think about that natural environment. How could you do that? How can you bring that into your space? We know that for forest schools and beach schools, that's very easily achieved, but within the sphere of education, within schooling, how can we do that? So I want you to reflect on that within your practice. Now, this was a really interesting study. Free flow provision does not ensure all children reach the recommended levels of physical activity. So I did the most recent study with Birmingham City University on this very subject. So I interviewed, I think it was about 51 practitioners in the end, reception practitioners, and I asked them what levels did they think their children were reaching. So looking at the 180 minutes and the 60 minutes, do they think their children were reaching those levels? Most of them said yes, they were reaching 180 minutes, but they weren't so sure about the 60 minutes because they had free flow provision. So they were outside on the climbing apparatus, on the locomotor activities, all those different things they were accessing. And they said, you know, they weren't still, they're never still, but very often, unless we're sitting down doing phonics. But we then invited the educators to create a time-lapse study. So over a 30-minute period, for 3 or 4 times a week, asking them to just have a look and gauge where the children were. So all the children's names and then what they were playing with for 30 minutes and then going to check. So it was really interesting to see that most of them identified that the children actually weren't getting as much physical activity as they thought. Because what they discovered was that it was the same group of children who were always on the bikes, who were always on the climbing apparatus. And there was a small group of children who were less active, who were just going out there to see what everybody else was doing and then coming back in again. So in order to know your children, you need to identify what play is happening. So have a think about how you can do that. Got some children in some lovely outdoor environments there. So children's muscle control and coordination is developed in a natural, orderly way, from the top down and from the inside out. It's called the snowflake effect. So it starts at the head and works towards the bottom of the body, building out from the torso into the limbs. So we need to be thinking about the importance of this for writing skills. So I have lots of other courses which you'll see on the website that look specifically at early writing skills, at mathematical development, at well-being, at specifically PE as well, and also boosting learning through movement. Oh, and another one, instant impacting ideas, which is just full of lots of practical ideas where I show you practical things to do with the children within your class. So climbing, hanging, swinging, and all these other high energy activities will build strength in the upper body and the core muscles. Now the shoulder girdle, which supports the upper arm, uses the strength of the trapezius and the deltoid muscles that go over here. Now, the only time that those two muscles are working cohesively is when you're suspending, when hanging. There was a study done by a gentleman called Seymour in the States where lots of monkey bars were removed from schools, and he looked at how that had changed children's shoulder girdle development. And so he then did a study with those that had monkey bars and those that didn't, and saw a real correlation in those that had exposure to monkey bars having stronger upper body and strength for early mark making and writing skills. So have a think about what apparatus you've got there to strengthen the shoulder girdle, to use the trapezius and the deltoid muscles. Think about all of those muscles that you can use to support all of those activities. Okay, so what we're going to do now, everybody, is I'm going to go back to that other slide. I'm going to stop my share. Oh, actually, I might not need to. I think I can probably do it here, because what we're going to do is we're going to do a little activity, because I don't promote sedentary behaviour. So we just want to kind of stop our sitting down. But for those of you that perhaps might not want to stand up, I'm going to be easy on you. So I'm going to use my chair, and I want you all to sit with quite a big space around you, and we're going to do an activity which can be easily adapted within the classroom. So if you've got a classroom space where chairs are under tables, you would get the children to turn the chairs around, and so the back of the chair is against the table. And if you're in a bigger space, then we can do this standing up as well. But it's just a 3.5 minute movement activity that's going to support midline development. So midline development is where we cross over the midline and the vertical line axis. So as soon as we're doing anything that's opposite work, what we're doing is connecting both hemispheres of the brain, so the left and the right side, across the corpus callosum, which is the bridge in the middle. So as soon as we're doing that, we are strengthening those neural connections from both sides of the brain. So automatically we're going to feel more alert, and we're going to be developing more synapse and neuron connectivity from both sides. Okay, so are you ready? Let's get the music on.
Come da porca picchita va bene, se tu la parla miezza americano, quando si parla amore sotto la luna, come da bene non vedi I love you.
Make an L shape. Right side. Hold on your chest. Using our core strength now. Keep going. Make sure you straighten it. And up, up, out, down. Up, roll. You can go the other way. Right, feel up. Again, feel up. Feel up. Now we do it quicker.
Come da porca picchita va bene, se tu la parla miezza americano, quando si parla amore sotto la luna, come da bene non vedi I love you.
Yeah, I think you have enough breath. Now hold on to the back of your chair. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Roll the arms. Other way. Out, out, over your knees. Very good. Okay, so that was only 3.5 minutes. Did it feel like 3.5 minutes? Probably not. Hopefully you'll start to feel heart rate, using that midline development, connecting both sides of the brain, and hopefully you'll feel a little bit more alert than you felt when you came in at 1 o'clock. Now, I just thought it would be good to have some more practical ideas to then pass on to you for schools. So I don't know if anybody remembers one of these from their childhood. It's interesting, I was working virtually in China last week. Sorry, in China and in India. And in India, it's called a chip chop. Here in the UK, we call it a fortune teller. So we can make these with the children and then encourage them to take them home. So we're looking at those 180 minutes and seeing if children will do some more activities. If you have something, some portal where you can communicate with parents, perhaps get them to help their children make them, let you know how many activities you can do. So we'll start with red. R, E, D, and then we'll look for numbers. Number 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to open number 6. Number 6 says, can you walk while balancing a book on your head? So you've got to balance the book and see if you can walk without it falling off. Be better not with a bun. Some of the other activities. Can you move like a crab on the floor? Can you do 10 star jumps? Can you bounce and box like a kangaroo? So you can make up lots of physical activities to do. And this is a really good one for COVID time as well, because children can do this independently. Then, if we want to look at storytelling, again, looking from a physical activity point of view, so we've got an old gentleman, a baby, a little girl and little boy. And then on the other side, I've got different environments. I've got space, countryside, city, beach, etc. And then inside, we've got different nouns. We've got a key, a flower, a magic wand, a door, a feather, a ball. I think that's a dragon, but it could be a unicorn or a horse. It can be whatever you want it to be. And a boat. So you can play that same game and help the children to create stories and develop drama and role play using the fortune tellers. It's a great way to do that. So they are my ideas. As I say, in the other sessions that I'm doing, the other modules, each module has 3 or 4 activities that I will demonstrate for you. And the instant impacting movement ideas has about 12, 15 activities, because that session is all about the activities. So if you do want to know more, then please join up on the other sessions. In the meantime, I just want to finish with this slide, which is one of my favourite quotes. It's actually on my fridge, and it's Rudolf Steiner. Are you worthy of imitation? Because in early childhood, when you're working with under 7s, they're watching you all the time. And we know that because we see them being us, don't we? So are we worthy of that imitation? It's interesting, I was doing some work in the school before COVID, and we were looking at supporting a whole movement philosophy within the school. It was a primary school, and I was working in inset training day, and I was talking to the staff, and I said about, are you worthy of imitation? And then the following day after that was when I was doing my consultancy. So I was at the same school watching the teachers work with the children. And it was one teacher in particular, bless her, she was great. But every time she got off the floor, I saw her do this, oh, 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 oh. And we just have to think about the message that we're giving children. It might be tricky for you to get up and down off the floor, but perhaps we need to smile through that pain and let the children know that actually we are full of beans and excitable and we want to move. Another teacher, they were doing the daily mile at this school, and one of the teachers was standing at the gate. She said, oh, I don't run. And so she was just saying, yeah, keep going, another 2 laps, children, woo, woo, woo. But again, what message is that saying? If you can't run, that's completely understandable, but you could walk with them, or perhaps you could be there giving them a little stamp once they've gone around the field 3 times. Or you might be the teacher that has a long piece of ribbon tucked in and they've got running first in front of them, they've got to try and catch you. It's all about the affordances, it's all about imitation and providing the environment and the stimuli and that support as us as educators that we can give the children. So know your gifts, know your talents, know your skills, and remember, you are amazing. Okay, so there's my Twitter and Facebook page and my email there if anybody has any questions. But I know we're going to have a question time here. And then here are the other courses that I'm delivering for Infinite Learning. So I'd like to thank Rebecca and Paola for inviting me here to deliver this session. And I think we're now moving to the Q&A time.
Yes, thank you, Helen. Thank you so much. Absolutely fascinating presentation. In fact, some of those statistics were quite mind-blowing and scary, which I think is not necessarily a bad thing, that sometimes we are shocked and reflect on what we are doing, what we're not doing, and where we maybe need to fill some of those gaps. So thank you for sharing all that information and so many great ideas with us. Of course, this is just the tip of the iceberg, folks. This is just to give you a little taster. As you know, we're running lots of courses around this theme with Helen, and I'm just, excuse me a minute while my eyes are not looking directly at you, I'm just seeing if we've got any questions that have come in. Okay, so we had some answers to the 180 minutes where that was the answer of how much exercise, and of course, as you might have predicted, people went in with 30 and 60 minutes, and of course it was much higher than that. I think that was the the big wow one, and just some feedback so far, guys. If you've got any questions, please do put them in. Helen's more than happy. She's here with us for another 10-15 minutes. If you've got questions, please throw those out. So far, we've just had some lovely feedback, Helen, from Lizanne, saying thank you for a fantastic webinar. Oh, this is wonderful. The webinar makes me excited to try new ideas and has inspired me. Helen, I know that will be music to your ears. Excuse the on your name. That's wonderful. And Simon Cassidy saying thanks so much. Please, any questions? I love the bubble wrap idea. That's nice. So lots of good feedback. Any questions for anybody out there?
Just this might be something, because I know some people might work with over fives, because we talked about the 180 minutes for under fives. For basically for 6 up, it's 60 minutes. So it drops from 180 minutes to 60 minutes of high impact. 60 minutes of physical activity with 30 minutes of high impact. So that's quite a significant drop there. But,
yeah. So just while we're maybe waiting for a few more questions to come in, let me just tell you, if you've got any questions that you haven't put forward that you think about afterwards, please do get in touch. If you'd like any further advice from Helen, we can certainly put you in touch, or any more advice or information about early years movement training that we're running in partnership with Helen. Please don't hesitate to get in touch. As I mentioned again, a video recording of this webinar will be with you. So if there's any of those fancy moves from Helen that you fancy reenacting in your classrooms, you'll be able to have another look and see exactly how she did that. And also you'll receive tomorrow a short webinar survey and a certificate of attendance. So please do give us your feedback. Again, after this webinar's finished, we'll send you an email with a PowerPoint and some video links that you can also use in developing sessions in your classroom with your children. Now, the first course that we are running with Helen as a follow-on from this free webinar is entitled Early Years PE Movement Matters. It takes place on Wednesday, the 14th of October, from 4 p.m. to 5:30. So similar timings to this, just going on obviously a little bit longer, an hour and a half. It's only 420 dirhams per delegate. So if your school is not feeling flush right now, it's probably affordable for you as individuals to perhaps partake. And obviously if you book by the 30th of September, there's an early bird discount of 50 dirhams. So it's worth booking on early if you can. If there's a group of you, we can do discounts for group booking. So please do get in touch. Let's see if there's any more questions while I've been rabbiting on. Let's have a quick look, see if there's anything else. Any more stuck at your desk ideas would be great in the current restrictions.
Yes, so looking at the one we did with the chair, so adapting that. Another activity that I like to play is where you get them all, obviously they'll have to be in their bubble for this activity, but again, turn the chairs around, have the backs of the chairs to the table. And then simple questions. I call this game Rebecca's actually seen me play this game with them.
Yes.
So
it's a great
you would start off saying, so you always take one chair away as well, so there's one chair missing. And that child would say something on the lines of, I have a cat. So if you've got a cat, if those children that have got a cat have a cat, they have to get off their chair and find another chair to sit on. Now, looking at helping different areas of learning, so if you want to look at recognition of letters or understanding their own names, you could have my name starts with an H. If your name starts with a H, then you've got to swap place and find, or I am 4. If you are 4, stand up and find somewhere else to sit, or I have a sister. So it's a great one for knowledge and understanding of the world, mathematics, colour recognition. You could also do it for blends for older children. You could do high frequency words. You could give them laminated words. If you've got the word if, you've got to swap places with somebody else. It's a really great one to get children moving and help to recognise different things as well. Is that a good one?
Yeah, great. It's a brilliant one. I've seen it in action, and let me tell you, with adults, it becomes mighty competitive very quickly.
Yeah.
Yes, I love the idea. This is just more feedback, really. I love the idea of movements on the chair, as it's difficult to get year 1s, 2s, and 3s moving in a socially distancing classroom. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're all struggling. You know, my children are 12, 14 and 16, and so they understand what distance means, and even they find it difficult, because it is, isn't it? It's not a natural thing to do. We're human beings. We like that sort of proximity and tactile side of being human. So I think for the really young ones, that must be even more difficult to comprehend, and certainly to enforce. So yes, actually being plonked on a chair and that's your sort of space, I can see how that would work really well. So yeah, thank you, Jennifer, for that comment.
That's a good idea for that one, but if they're struggling for space as well, for that age group, is that I recommend that they take, if they've got sort of writing sheets, if they've got some worksheets, that you stick them underneath the desks and that they lay down on their back and they complete. Obviously, if it's not a big writing task like creative writing, but if it's a maths one or if it's art, that they do it on their backs, and you'll see it's incredible. It's also really good for upper body, and you'll see it develops more creativity and more flow, because they're using the changing in the environment and working on different levels as well.
Yeah, no, sounds exciting. And imagine walking into a classroom and seeing that. That would be exciting, wouldn't it? I wonder what the inspectors would make of it. Hopefully they'd be impressed. Another message coming in. Thank you, Helen. This webinar has been insightful. I cannot wait to bring these ideas into my classroom. So as I say, guys, this is literally just the tip of the iceberg to give you a little taster. If you really want to put more structure around this and get more resources and more ideas, you know, do have a look at this one course that we're running, and then as Helen's shown on her slide, there's a whole series of these coming up, so there'll be certainly something there, I'm sure, that's appropriate for your needs and your children, your school. Do go and have a look on our e-learning website to find more details of those courses. That's www.infinitelearning.ae, and you'll go to virtual courses and you'll see early years, and then you'll find all Helen's courses there. If you're struggling at all, please just drop us an email and we'll help you there. And please also go have a look at our webinar page, hopefully where you found out about this course. The next one we've got coming up is actually focusing on trust. It's led by a wonderful lady called Jeannie Davis, and it's entitled The Trust Revolution in Schools, How to Create Humane, High Performance and Collaborative Cultures. So it promises to be a really interesting one. So do take a look and let us know. That one's taking place on Tuesday, the 13th of October. It's free again, so please do sign up. Okay, I think, hold on, no, we've got one more from Vita here. So we are having our 4-year-olds in distance learning only so far. How can we engage these children in PE if we see them for 20 minutes approximately in live sessions?
So the top tips are getting your hands on the parents somehow, isn't it? Because as we know, the adult within that environment is the facilitator. Children will only be as active as their environment allows. I do have, if you look onto my website, which is musicandmovement.org.uk, there's a section called Family Fun in a Tin, which is what I called lockdown for those of us with young children in families, because some of us, it felt like we were sort of sardines in a tin. And there are lots of activities there. So even just sending those links out to parents to access those different things. There are things just like making your own obstacle course, making the fortune teller, building dens in the house, chalking out hopscotch on the kitchen floor, things like that. Really simple things that probably you'll resonate with as when you were a child. But it's about getting them to be as active as possible. There are also lots of fabulous YouTube videos on there that you can follow as well. So I've got different chair dances and different Disco Friday activities that you can follow as well if you want to learn some dance routines with your under 6s.
Yeah, that's great. And I think actually the advice about getting parents on board and possibly sending some communication to the parents at home saying these sessions will be happening at this time, you know, join in with your kids, demonstrate good practice if you can. I mean, obviously a lot of parents are working, of course, but you know, I think getting their support absolutely is hugely important, isn't it?
But if you do only have 20 minutes, obviously the children are really going to need that relationship time with you. They're going to need that time to talk to you, to be with you, because they're going to miss that's something that's so important. So that's imperative. But even if it's, you know, just for 2 minutes, okay, can everybody go and find something orange and bring it back to me? So while you're on sort of a live feed with them, can they go and find something? Can you go and find me something round? Can you go and find me that would fit inside a cup? giving them little ways to just get moving, because even for a child, sitting in front of a screen for 20 minutes for a sort of virtual lesson can be a challenge for that age group.
Brilliant. And so such simple ideas. I love it. You know, you might have sat there racking your brains. Yeah, just go find something orange, something round. That's just getting them active, isn't it? And getting them using their brains and eyes and looking for things and being engaged. So really simple, great ideas. Thank you so much, Helen. I think we're coming to an end now. I don't see any more questions. Lots of thank yous coming through again. So I think everyone's found it really enjoyable. Do guys go have a look at the course. Lots of people saying thank you, simple and great. Yes, I hope that helped, Beta. Thank you all for coming and for joining us on this webinar today. As I say, we've got more webinars coming up. We're trying to run one at least once a month, you know, to help and support you guys. You're all doing an amazing job in schools from what I've seen. You know, we know it's an incredibly challenging time. My husband works in a school where he has children in front of him. He then has children in a virtual learning room because they have to spread out the students across one classroom to make sure they're distant. They've got distance learning going on as well, so you're almost teaching in 3 different forums, and you know, it's a challenge, and you're all doing absolutely brilliantly. So yeah, we commend you all. Absolutely amazing. Keep it up, and hopefully Infinite Learning and wonderful providers like Helen can support you a little bit along the way. That would be wonderful to think we had. So it's goodbye from Infinite Learning and from Helen until the next webinar. Wishing you a lovely evening and a lovely weekend for those of you in the UAE. We've got 1 day to go. We're nearly there. Okay, have a good rest when you get there, and thanks again for joining us. Bye.
Bye.